So this video is a bit out of the ordinary for me, not because I'm switching on my style or anything, but I normally wait until games are content complete or done getting patches. This game, however, is a unique case since it's kind of special in my eyes for reasons I'll talk about in a bit, but I just couldn't wait. I wanted to talk about Lost Soul Aside now! And since they're actively updating the game, I'll update my script as long as I haven't finished voiceover for whatever I'm talking about. This is also an excuse so I can do another video on this game once it's all patched up. But before we get into Lost Soul Aside, it has quite the history in the games industry, so let's start where it all began. In 2014, a person named Yang Bing would upload an animation he made in Unreal Engine 4 to YouTube. The reason he made the animation was to study the engine, and honestly it's not bad for presumably one of the first things he's made in it. Now I don't know if he made that animation in 2014 or just uploaded it then, but the progress Yang Bing made in a year and a half is astounding, because in 2016 he would upload a trailer showing off a whole ass game he was making called Lost Soul Aside. The trailer showed off some flashy looking combos with great animations, and the game visually looked stunning for the time, especially for an independent game. The trailer would end up going viral, and I got wind of it sometime in 2017, and my prepubescent self loved it. It reminded me of Final Fantasy 15, which I had played briefly, and come to find out, it was inspired by games like DMC and Versus 13 or Final Fantasy 15. Maybe taking too much inspiration from the former since they were in development for similar times. Random people on the internet aren't the only people that caught wind of the game, however, as Sony got in touch with Yang Bing to see if he wanted to join their China Hero project, which sought to bring in funding, team members, and help market games from Chinese-based studios. Later in 2017, Lost Soul Aside would show up at PSX with a gameplay demo, and it still had that same flashy looking combat with new weapons and satisfying finishers on top of it now. It seemed to be shaping up nicely, and the following year a new trailer would come out that had a bit more of a focus on story, but not much as the combat's the main focus, so of course there's more of that, and it was looking pretty polished at this point. Throughout the years, Yang Bing would slowly hire people, at first just a couple, and then a few more, until 2020 when Ulta Zero Games, the name of his studio, would grow to almost 30 people with not much to show for it, because after 2018 there was really not much communication about the game aside from a comment from Sony stating that development was stable, and Yang Bing making a statement saying he'd like the game to release in 2020. Foreshadowing's a bitch, ain't it? Development had more or less restarted by 2020, and the scope of the project was tuned down because making an open-world action game turns out is quite difficult for a team with very little to no development experience prior. The new and improved Lost Soul Aside would show its head in 2021 with a fresh look for Kaiser, whose new outfit was designed by Rowan, the same company that did the fashion for the Final Fantasy 15 crew. This trailer seemed a lot more polished than anything we've seen before from Lost Soul Aside. The combat still looked flashy, though tuned down a tad, and the whole presentation showed off a good chunk of one of the levels, including 3 bosses, all of which were vastly different in design and mechanically. There was also a focus on making some pretty sick looking cutscenes. Yeah, safe to say my hype for the game was back, so much so that it sparked me to do my own video talking about how excited I was for it.
They also showed off a crazy fight with another character that could be an antagonist.
Well done, genius, you really sniffed that one out. In 2022, PlayStation would officially acknowledge the game on their official account, showing the most amount of Lost Soul Aside we have ever seen, including more enemy types, bosses, and a handful of gorgeous looking areas. Finally, it seemed the game was not too far from a release date. You know what? I'm bored. Let's just skip a few years. There was a trailer with a beautiful song in 2024, but didn't show much new. However, in February 2025, we'd get our first big look into the story and cinematics. But more importantly, a release date of May 30th, followed by radio silence until the end of April when they announced the game was delayed to August 29th, followed again by radio silence for months. The marketing of this game was in shambles since we wouldn't get another trailer until the month of release. Sony, sweetheart, do you want your games to be known or not? At least one of the videos released was interesting because we got a peek behind the curtain a bit and see some of the devs making the game and them talking a bit about the development. Definitely worth a watch, so the video will be linked below. Lost Soul Aside finally launched on August 29th to no reviews, but that's why I'm here, because I'm not a coward. So let's dive into Lost Soul Aside, the passion project of one man that's finally seeing the light of day. The story is by far the worst thing about Lost Soul Aside, as the voice acting is only okay. There's a few rough moments like this. And the characters have a lifeless doll look to them, which feels uncanny. The overarching plot is simple. Kaiser and his sister Louisa are a part of the Glimmer Resistance group, which seek to oppose the Empire in the least violent way by setting off fireworks during a parade. Yep, that'll show them. Oh dear. Mysterious beings called the Voidrax then violently ruin the parade and also send Kaiser into the bad scream pit. While being separated from Louisa, Kaiser meets his new companion Arena. He helped lead the pacifist Voidrax in war 100 years ago to protect the Life Nexus and was sealed away by the Emperor afterwards because he needed his energy, but he can't have that energy anymore since he's our buddy, pal, and amigo all at the same time because he can transform into whatever Kaiser needs. Although not sure if he can transform into a therapist. Luckily she's not gone, just her soul is. Thankfully Celeria knows of a way to free lost souls by collecting the 4 soul fragments found in the alternate dimensions. This all sounds like a bunch of hoopla, and to be frank, it is, because they don't bother to explain how most of this stuff works, it just does. The characters are also fairly one-note with not much development. Kaiser always sounds uninterested by stuff going on and stays as the cheesy hero boy with little personality, and the companions you're joined by don't get much screen time, so there's not much room for them to grow. Like Leona and Gethia only join you because one wants to write a novel, and Gethia wants to study the world, so she mainly talks about the places you visit, which makes for some well done world building, but at the cost of intriguing characters. This isn't to say there is zero depth to the characters, it's just that it's not in the main story. While running around, you may get the occasional tidbit about something or someone, like learning that Gethia's dad was locked up by the Emperor for suggesting to make knowledge about the Voidrax public, which in turn got Gethia exiled, and her father later died in prison. But a lot of the backstory and lore comes from the journal. Unfortunately, that involves reading, so engage at your own risk. I know, it can be scary. If there's one thing the story does right, it's making some pretty sick cinematics, although most are held back by poor sound effects and stiff animations. Regardless, they are still hype as fuck and easily the most memorable moments of the story.
Are you okay, Kaiser?
I'm in one piece.
You lying sack of shit! Now in some of the footage you'll notice the camera stuttering while running around, and that was an issue at launch but has since been fixed and looks silky smooth now. Kaiser and Arena will travel across the world. Very interesting name, I know, but what the world lacks in an interesting name it makes up for with a handful of visually striking areas that you travel to with the most adorable world map I've ever seen. Each level offers a vastly different look, from the icy white Frosthold, Mistwood's beautiful autumn colors, to the wonderful view of Lakeside View. The first thing you'll notice when setting foot on a new area is the music, which can just give this mystical magical feeling as you stroll through wherever you are, or be rather calming like Mistwood's song. Of course, there's more to each area than just the music, as you'll find materials for crafting, treasure chests filled with loot, or collecting various orbs for more skill points. And the level design is pretty good. Every area is linear, but there are branching paths and secret areas which can reward you with any of the things listed, and sometimes have an optional boss that are always fun to fight, as you'll learn when we get to the combat. There's also dungeons, or dimensions as the game calls them, where the primary objective is to gather the soul crystal fragments to free the souls of those consumed. Before getting it though, you'll have to primarily kill enemies because it's an action game, but in between that you'll be tested on your puzzle solving and platforming prowess. However, the test for puzzles is akin to that of a first grade math quiz. They're not really gonna send neurons to your brain ever, and the platforming can be pretty challenging, which sometimes is because the platforming itself is hard, but most of the time it's because the platforming just felt clunky and lacks an easy way to tell if you're gonna land on a small platform or not. Luckily they made the platforming feel a lot better by making it so you don't roll after a double jump anymore, which made it more enjoyable to do. There's also an ability you get later on that helps a bit with lining yourself up with platforms, so by the end it ends up feeling rather smooth. Some people may not like having to do puzzles or platforming in an action game, but for me I found it as a nice change of pace, because if my fingers had to do combos with little breaks, my ass would get carpal tunnel so fast. After every chapter you'll go back to the hub town that looks quite drab compared to other places, but that's fine, as it's more important for its usefulness, as you can purchase trinkets for your weapons, or crafting recipes, and the game never tells you that you have to buy those, nor are they marked on your map, which I'd say is something players should be aware of, considering the items you can craft are high potions, valor potions, holy gifted potions, or basically anything on this list, since they're all useful for something. One thing I do hope gets added is being able to head back to town during a mission, so if you forget to buy stuff while you're in town, then you can just head back and do it instead of completing an entire chapter and then being able to buy stuff again. The combat is the thing the team spent the most time slaving away on, and it shows because it's so fucking fun, man. At the beginning you only have access to a sword, so it can feel pretty limiting at first, but pretty quickly you'll start getting skill points by killing enemies and doing any of the stuff I mentioned earlier, then things start opening up a bit more. But if that's not enough for your greedy butt, then fear not, as throughout the story you'll get 3 new weapons: a great sword, polearm, and scythe, each of which open the combat more and more until you're doing the sickest, flashiest combos on Voidrak's enemy number 443. Every weapon has a different use in combat. The sword is a jack of all trades, master of none. The great sword deals massive damage and is great for combo enders. The polearm is good for range and ruining Voidrax's life. And the scythe is kinda just fucking busted. It can pull enemies to you and can reset your air combo with this move so you can deal even more damage. You don't need to master them all though if you don't want to. If you have a bias towards like 2 of them, then you can still do some neat stuff while throwing in a move or 2 from the other weapons if need be. There's also some customization you can do to the weapons, like putting trinkets on them that you gather throughout the game, which have some stat buffs along with them. On top of that, you'll find variants of each weapon that have elements on them, and that'll become apparent why that's important in a little bit. The enemy design is pretty good and quite varied, so it never ended up feeling samey throughout the game, and they naturally have different attacks, so you'll always have to figure out the timing to dodge or parry. You may also notice an elemental symbol which indicates what that enemy is weak to, though it's not going to make a drastic difference if you don't capitalize on it for combo fodder, so don't worry about constantly switching around your weapons. However, the elements do more than just exploit weaknesses, as they can put statuses on enemies, like Frost, which makes the afflicted take more damage, Fire, that burns your enemies for a period of time, and Lightning, which spreads to nearby enemies. You can even mix and match them together, like hitting a frosted enemy with Lightning will deal massive damage. An action game can't just be defined by flashy combos and fun mechanics, but for me, if the enemies are aggressive on top of that, then it feels even more satisfying, and thankfully they are in Lost Soul Aside. They're not like relentless or anything, like you'll still be able to pull off set combos, but if you don't learn to dodge and parry right, then you can absolutely just get rocked, which kept the combat engaging for my entire playthrough. The bosses also provide a fun challenge, and whoo boy, there's a lot of them, most of which are very unique from one another. Some can definitely feel like a slog, like this one, which feels pretty samey and takes quite a while for him to die, but others are wildly different. For instance, this bitch that belongs in Returnal. The core loop for each boss is to not die and reduce their stagger bar so they're stunned for a few moments and you can deal as much damage as you can. Luckily, Arena's by your side, who gets up to 3 abilities which can help with staggering and damage, healing, or more. Kaiser and Arena can fuse together as well to become Super Saiyan and makes everything deal more damage. Parrying is also very helpful because it takes a big chunk of the stagger bar each time. While staggered, a prompt will show up for a sync finisher that you can do at any time before the bar fills up, though it's usually best to do it last second. And depending on the boss, you may be able to juggle them as they're staggered, and the neat thing with that is you can continue juggling even when the stagger meter is full, so if you're skilled enough, you can get in a lot of extra damage and potentially end it with a sync finisher if you're really good. If you'd like to put your combat prowess to the test, then there is a training mode which is fun to mess around in, or you can do dispersed dimensions that you find around levels and have various tasks to complete which can give materials for crafting or upgrades to Arena's abilities. I never felt a reason to do them for the rewards though, I just found them as a fun thing to do to kill some time. Although Lost Soul Aside launched with a number of bugs and optimization issues, I have nothing but respect for the dev team, as since the writing of this video they have put out so many patches in such a short time. So I'm excited to see where the game is in 6 months to a year's time, and I'll absolutely do another video revisiting it. But even without any current and future patches, I still thoroughly enjoyed the game. I feel like some people's expectations were too high for the project because they hear, oh, this game's been in development for 10 years, so it must be the greatest thing ever made, which I can't blame people for not doing research, but at the same time, if you're gonna judge a game based off time in development, then maybe you should look into what's happened during that time, because odds are, if a game's in development for that long, then something must have happened. And as I stated earlier, they had to restart development in 2020 since there was a constant fight of artistry and engineering, so the team had to rein in the scope, and we still managed to get a damn fun action game out of it. Also, it being full price definitely didn't help with people's expectations. I'm more than happy to just have this game exist because I was looking forward to it for so long, and I'm sure teenager me would be incredibly happy to know Lost Soul Aside eventually released. Anyway, that does it for this video. There's a bit of content I haven't talked about in Lost Soul Aside, like New Game Plus and the boss rushes, because I'm gonna save that stuff for when I do another video on the game. But I'll be covering a lot of games in the meantime, so stay tuned for that. See you all in the next video. Bye bye!